Hey guys, this is Lucas from Better Coding Academy, and in this Code With Me episode, I'm going to show you how to build an application that uses GraphQL, Sequelize, TypeScript, and also React Hook Form, just a whole bunch of really nice things, and I'm going to run you through the whole build process. So this will involve learning TypeScript, learning a bit of GraphQL, and also working with MySQL database using Sequelize. Oh, and also the MySQL database will be using Docker. So yeah, it's just a big mix of technologies I think you're going to really enjoy. Let's get started straight away. So the first thing I'm going to do is I've just got an empty directory over here. I'm going to do yarn init -y to just create a package.json file. And I've just got a simple file here. And I'm also going to create another file. And I'm going to do npx gitignore node. So now that we've done that, it's created a gitignore file for us containing everything that we need to ignore. So that's if you need to upload to Git or GitHub or whatever. If you don't need to do that, then you don't need this file, but I'm going to include that here. And now we are going to create two directories. So the first directory is going to be called app, and the second one is going to be services. So our services is basically our server, and our app is our front end app. So a little bit of an explanation of what we're building here. We're going to be building a very simple storage solution for chefs and their restaurants. So basically, it's just going to show a list of chefs and then also the restaurants associated with each chef. And I'm going to show you how to build that right now. So let's go into both directories here. So I'm going to split up my terminal into two, and then in the top one I'm going to go into services, and in the bottom one I'm going to go into the app. So over here in the services, let's do yarn init -y again, because we need a package.json file specifically for this directory here, because we have packages and things that we need to install inside of here. So instead of calling it services, I like to call it GraphQL Sequelize demo -services. So essentially the name of this one here, and then followed by -services at the end. So now that we've done this, let's do this for the app as well. So yarn init -y, and we have package.json here, and same thing, we're going to call it GraphQL Sequelize demo app, like that. So now that we've done this, let's go and set up the services. So we're going to install a few things to begin here. So first and foremost, let's go here and let's add in as development dependencies, we're going to add in module alias, ts-node-dev, and also TypeScript. So these three are for setting up TypeScript locally and getting it working. And I'm going to show you what I'm going to do with these. So now that we've added these three, let's get a very, very basic application type thing set up here. So firstly, let's create a new file. I'm going to call this one index.dev.ts, and I'm going to write here console log working. So it's just going to show working on my page here. And inside of my package.json, what I'm going to do is create a scripts configuration object here, and I'm going to go here and add in here a watch script. I'm going to call it right in here ts-node-dev respawn index.dev.ts. So now that we've done this, we should be able to go into services, do yarn watch, and then it should show working on the page like that. And then if we type rs and press enter, that restarts it and it'll show working again. So now we can control C that, so we don't need to run that at the moment. And now you'll see we have index.dev.ts set up. So now that we have this, let's go and create a README file inside of the services. So specifically, this README file is going to contain some information on how to set up this whole services here. And one of the things I'm going to add into here is a Docker command for setting up the MySQL database. So let's go up here. I'm going to call this one GraphQL and Sequelize demo project. I'm going to go here and write getting the database set up. So this is going to be my section on setting up the database. And then what we're going to do is I've already got this set up, so I'm just going to copy it straight over here. I'm not going to pretend like I'm writing this on the spot. I'm just being very honest. I've got my code over here on a separate screen, but I'm showing you the setup process as to how I would do this if I were to set it up from scratch, which is what I did the first time around. So anyways, this is a Docker command I use quite a lot. This one specifically sets up on my SQL database. So let me run you through this one here. The first line here is docker run, and these backslashes basically allow us to write it over multiple lines, but this is essentially one command. So instead of this backslash, you can just do that as well, and it's the same thing. So anyways, this part here, this means that we're going to run it on the port 0000, which is essentially it is the port on our computer which allows us to access it locally, but also access it on different computers on the local network as well. And this port here is the port that we can access it on our computer, and then this port is the port inside of the Docker container. So essentially, the MySQL Docker container runs in a way that locally inside of the container, it has its own development environment, and it has the port 3306. So MySQL uses 3306 by default, but then what happens is when it becomes accessible on our computer, we don't necessarily want to access it on that same port. We want to use 7999. And the reason I like to use this is because I'm going to set up this whole project to use 7,000 something. So specifically, the services is going to run on 7,000, the app's going to run on 7,001, and the database is on 7999. So that's what I like to do, because if you put everything on 3306, then you can very quickly have conflicts. So this is what we're doing here. This is the name of the Docker container, which is going to be gsddb. MySQL root password is password. We're going to create a user called gsddev. Password is password. Database is gsd. And we're using MySQL 5.7.20. So this isn't actually, well, this is the version of MySQL that we're using, but specifically this is the Docker container image that we're going to be referencing. So in this case, they use 5.7.20 to also refer to the MySQL version, but that doesn't necessarily have to be the case. So just a little fact to point out there. Let's grab this command here and let's paste it into the services box here. And then I'm going to press enter, and my one automatically creates a container. If you haven't worked with MySQL containers before in the past, it should do some sort of downloading, installing, pulling, that sort of thing. Let that do its thing, and it should give you something like this at the end. This is the ID of the container, but you don't have to worry about that. So now that this is set up, this kind of explains how that works and all of that. We have our README set up here. What we're going to do is we're going to start building out a bit of the services. But first and foremost, let's actually look at connecting to this database inside of SQL Pro. So I've got SQL Pro over here, and I actually have this as a favorite here, and I call it GraphQL Sequelize Demo. The host is 127.0.0.1. I think you can also write 0.0.0.0. Those two here really don't make a difference. The username is root, the password is password, database is GSD, and the port is 7999. So now what we can actually do is test the connection, and you'll see the connection should say connection succeeded, and then you can press connect to go into the database. So now that we're inside here, you'll notice that the database is completely empty, which is something we'll be fixing now. We'll be adding in the tables and also having a look at how to set up that using Sequelize. So specifically, let's go into the services here and let's have a look at package.json whilst we add in yarn add Sequelize, Sequelize CLI, and also Sequelize TypeScript, and also MySQL 2. So let me explain. Sequelize is what is called an ORM. So an ORM is called an object relational mapper. Essentially, it's an API that you can use to access your database using JavaScript, basically. You don't have to write direct SQL code. And the benefit of that is that you can take certain features and certain things that you want to do, and it takes it from, say, 20 lines of code, including SQL injection protection and security issues and all that kind of stuff, and it converts it into an API, which is really easy for you to use and consistently set up, which is why it's really nice to use. Now, I have used a lot of JavaScript ORMs, like honestly a lot. I've used one called Type ORM, I've used Sequelize, I've worked with Bookshelf, I've used Next before in the past as well. Quite a few of the big ones out there I've used. Personally, I've always been looking for something that is better than Sequelize, because I think Sequelize has a few problems of its own, but I've always ended up coming back to Sequelize because I realized that Sequelize definitely does provide the fullest feature set out of all of the ORMs out there. And specifically, I really like to use Sequelize TypeScript. This works really well for me, especially now that we're looking to build an application using TypeScript. So now that we've done this, let's look at setting up Sequelize to enable what I call migrations. So migrations are ways that your database can be updated to match the latest version of your application. So for example, let's say that now we have no tables at the moment, but we want to add in a chef's table and also a restaurant's table, which we'll do in just a second. Now, these would be what we call migrations. They're a way that you can use JavaScript code or use your own code to represent the database being changed from one state to another. So I'm going to write that out now. What we're going to do is we are going to create a directory here and call it Sequelize. And this is where we're going to put all of our Sequelize type stuff. And inside the root, we're going to create a file called .sequelizerc. And you'll notice that we get a nice symbol for that. So specifically inside of this file, you might want to change the syntax highlighting to be JavaScript, because we're going to write JavaScript into here, and we're going to do const path equals require path, module.exports is equal to config path.resolve dir name. And we're going to refer to that Sequelize directory, and we're going to refer to config.js. And then underneath this, we're going to write migrations path, and we're going to do path.resolve __ dir name /Sequelize /migrations. And this is going to be a directory full of our migrations. So now inside of Sequelize here, you might have guessed that we're going to create a file called config.js. But now before we actually continue setting up this file, let's go back into here and let's do yarn add.env. So we're going to add in .env, and then we're going to go into services, create a new file, call this one .env .example. So this is our example env file. Now, what a .env file is it essentially specifies the configuration for your application. For example, you might store things in here like the database username and password. You might store certain API keys that you don't necessarily want to commit to your GitHub. So these are things that you would use to configure your application, but that you don't want to store in the source code. So now inside of .env.example here, we're going to write into here, db URL is equal to MySQL root password. So this is the username, this is the password at 127.0.0.1:7999/GSD, and we're going to do charset equals UTF-8. Now this line here, you'll notice that we're writing it into .env.example, and we do want this file to be committed. Then you might ask, Lucas, didn't you just say that we're not meant to commit this file? That is true, but in this case, this is specifically for the local development environment. So imagine if this were actually on a real server and this were your production database, then there's no way that you would configure that. But in this case, we're using .env.example to make it easier to set up the actual .env file. So now we can copy this, create a new file, and just rename this to .env, and you'll notice that this file goes gray, or at least it should go gray if we had git set up. So I'm going to just go here to git init, go back into app, and you'll notice that this file here goes gray, and that means that Git is ignoring this file. And it should be that way because sometimes you can have some really sensitive information inside of here, but you should never put sensitive information in this file. Anyways, so now with that out of the way, we have .env here. We're going to go back into config.js, and we're going to write const.env is equal to require.env. So this is the one we just installed. Const path equals require path, and then we're going to do .env.config, and we're going to do path.resolve _ dir name /.env. So I'm just specifying the exact location of the .env file, which is the configuration file we're going to use. So now we go here, we do module.exports.development is equal to dialect is MySQL, the CEDA storage is Sequelize, and then the URL is process.env.db URL. Now the CEDA storage line probably doesn't do much in our case. The dialect represents the database system that we're trying to use. So in the case of Sequelize, it supports more than one database management system. In our case, we're only using MySQL. So that's what we're going to write here. And the URL represents the database URL containing all of the configuration information. So now we can copy this, paste it again, and do a similar thing for production. Which we don't actually need at the moment because I'm not going to be setting this up for production, but this is what we can keep for now. So now that we have these two here, we're going to go into Sequelize and create a new folder here called migrations. So now I'm going to show you how to set up a migration inside of Sequelize. So specifically, there is a special format that I like to use for the migrations. So I create a new file and I like to specify the date and also the time before actually writing the migration file name itself. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to write 20191127193138. So what this means is 2019 November the 27th at 19, which is 7 p.m, 31 minutes and 38 seconds. So this doesn't really matter the exact numbers that you put, but I like to put it to the current time. So 2019 11/27, 7:31 p.m. and 38 seconds. The reason that we put this before the actual name, which is createchefs.js, is because that way our migrations will be in order. So that's what I like to do. That's what Sequelize does by default as well. So this is the convention that I tend to go by. But I like to create my migrations myself as opposed to letting Sequelize do it for me, because I've seen how Sequelize does it and I don't really like it, which is why I do it myself. Anyways, let's go into here and I'm going to write module.exports.up is equal to query interface data types like this. And I'm going to just comment out here, and we're also going to do module exports.down is equal to query interface here as well, and we're going to leave it like that. So now, before I continue writing this, just a quick explanation on what these two functions do. So in the concept of migrations, there's the concept of an up and also a down. So up means that we're kind of upgrading the database system, we're taking it from one migration to the next, and it's increasing in complexity. Down means we're getting rid of a migration, we're trying to get rid of it. So in this case, for create chefs, we're going to be creating a table here. And then here, the opposite of that action will be drop a table. Now, obviously, you can understand that if you create a table and then you add a lot of data into it, and then you drop the table, there's no way to undo that. Like, there's no way to get back the data that you have added in the table during that time, which is why the down migration can be quite dangerous. So just be careful when you're downgrading, because you probably will lose data. And even if you remove a column, like, data will be lost. So that's the thing with migrations, is you need to understand how it works with your overall database structure and make sure you put it in properly. Anyways, let's go here and let's do return query interface, if I can spell properly, dot create table. It's going to be chefs, and then we're going to do curly braces, and then we're going to specify the columns in the table. So firstly, we're going to do ID, allow null is going to be false, auto increment is true, primary key is true, so this is the primary key for the table. Type is data types dot integer dot unsigned. So it's an unsigned int primary key auto increment. So if you've worked with SQL in the past, you probably understand what I'm talking about. But basically, this ID identifies each row uniquely. So that way we can identify each row separately from each other, and that's really important. So now that we've got this, let's add in the name as well. So name is going to be allow null or false, and then type is going to be data types dot string created at. So we're going to have a created at field, which is also supported by Sequelize natively, which basically is going to take the current time that the row was created. So allow null is false as well, and then type is data types dot date. And now we can actually grab this and repeat this 2 more times. This one's going to be updated at, allow null is false, so the last time that the row was updated. And then finally deleted at, and then this one is allow null is true. So let me explain what deleted at does. Deleted at specifically allows us to do what is called a soft delete. So a soft delete is when you have your data still stored inside of your database, but for all intents and purposes, it is deleted. So that way, if you do delete something in your front end and you actually want to recover it, there is that possibility in the back end because the data hasn't actually been deleted. So the deleted at column allows us to do that, where by default it is null, so which means it hasn't been deleted. And then there's also a deleted at, which takes in a date, the date upon which that row was deleted. And the great thing with ORMs and with Sequelize in particular is it allows us to support deleted at out of the box without having to do anything too much in addition to that. So that's really great, and that's what we're using here. So now we're going to put comma here after this one, and we're going to do char set is going to be UTF-8. So this is the character set for the database. I tend to like to use this simply because I work with data in a lot of different languages. So this really helps to get all of those encodings and also those emojis, which is really nice as well. So now for the down, what we're going to do is we have query interface over here, and we're going to do query interface.drop table chefs. So we're going to get rid of the chefs table when we go down. So now that we have this, what we're going to do is go back into package.json for the services, and we're going to go into script here, and we're going to add a script, if I can add one properly, db migrate, and this one is going to be Sequelize db migrate like that. We're going to have another one, call this one db migrate undo, and it's going to do db migrate undo like that. And then we're going to save this, and we're going to go into our services. And if you have .env set up and you have Sequelize set up and all of that, you should be able to go here and do yarn db migrate like that. And then once you do that, it should migrate the chefs table. So now that we've done that, we can open up SQL Pro, refresh over here, and you'll notice that now we have 2 tables. So specifically, we have a chefs table and also this other table called Sequelize meta. So Sequelize meta stores the names of all of the migrations that have already been run, which means that now if we try to run it again, you'll notice that it says no migrations were executed, database schema was already up to date. So that is the right thing to do here, because now our database schema is already up to date. We don't need to create chefs again. Now, if we wanted to undo this, we do db migrate undo, and it will go back 1 migration. And now if we refresh, you'll notice that chefs is gone, and inside of Sequelize meta, that row is gone as well. So now we can do db migrate again, and it will take back our chefs entry here, and also the chefs table here as well. So now that we've done this, let's create another one and call this one create restaurants. So I'm going to do 20191127, and this one I'm going to use 200232, and then hyphen create hyphen restaurants.js. So now that we have this file here, let's add into this file pretty much the same thing. So grab the other file here, copy, paste it over here, rename this one here to restaurants. And then the ID is essentially the same, but then we have another column here. So our restaurants belong to a specific chef. So each restaurant belongs to one chef. The chef ID here is going to be allow null false. And it's going to reference, if I can spell references correctly, references key ID, model is going to be chefs, so essentially the ID column of the chefs table, and then we're going to do type data types.integer.unsigned. Now this is really important because this needs to exactly match what we have inside of chefs, which is data types integer unsigned allow null false. If it doesn't match, then it will not allow you to create the foreign key. So now that we have that, we've got name here as well, created at, updated at, deleted at, that's all fine. And then for drop table, we just need to make sure that we write restaurants. So now that we've done this, let's go back here. Let's do db migrate again, and it will create our restaurants table. So now that we've done that, if we refresh, you'll notice that we now have 2 tables. And if we go into restaurants here and click relations, you'll notice that we have a foreign key. So this is a foreign key which references the ID column of the chef's table. So anyways, now that we have those 2 set up, let's look at setting up more of our services with regards to Express and also GraphQL. So anyways, let's go into the services here and let's add in yarn add Apollo server Express. So this is specifically for GraphQL, and let's also add in Express as well, body parser, and also cause. So now let's add in these ones, press enter. So Apollo server and Apollo server Express are for connecting to the Apollo GraphQL server. So we're going to create a local Apollo GraphQL server, and then Apollo server Express connects that with Express. And then Express is our HTTP server. Body parser is middleware that runs on Express, which allows us to work together with Apollo. And then also cause, which allows us to do cross-origin requests. And I'll show you how we use that in just a second. So now inside of index.dev.ts, instead of just writing this, let's write in import module alias /register. And let's also do import./src /index. So now that we have this, what module alias allows us to do is inside of package.json over here, we can do a comma here and then underscore module aliases, and then we put curly braces, and then we're going to do hash root :/src. So this allows us to use an absolute alias inside of our code, so we don't have to do that messy .. onto infinity. So anyways, now that we have this, let's go and create this file inside of services. So services src/index.ts, and this is our file here. So now inside of this file, the first thing we're going to do is just to import.m/config like that. And the 2 things we're going to do here, first one is going to be hash root /db/connection. And the second one is going to be hash root /server/start server. Now we're going to comment this out for the time being and focus solely on the first one. So this one's going to be for our database connection. So we go here to a new file, and we're going to create this one inside of db/connection.ts. And now inside of this file, we're going to write import Sequelize from Sequelize TypeScript. And then we're going to do import access env from hash root /helpers /access env. We're going to stop right here and we're going to create this file. So now hash root /helpers means inside of the src directory, we do helpers /access env.ts. So firstly, let's write our cache here and let's define a TypeScript types for it here. So it's going to be key string and it's going to be any is equal to curly braces like that. So this is going to be our cache, and then we do const access env is equal to key string and the default value any like that. And then we do if key in process.env. So if we can't find the key, then if there is a default value, we return this value, or otherwise we throw an error. So throw new error, and then we do key not found in process.env like that. And then we go here, if cache key, and then return cache key. So we return it like that. And then otherwise we get it from process.env and we return it. So process.env key like that. And then we do export default access env like this. And what this function allows us to do is get the values from inside process.env. Now, the reason that we do this cache is because accessing from process.env actually takes a performance toll. So it's not just a simple object that you can access. So which is why we do this kind of caching, which makes it easier to access the second and third time. So now that we have this file here, it's giving us an error for process. And the reason for that is because we don't have type definitions for Node. So we go into services here and let's do yarn add -d at types /node like that. So what we need to do now is probably to get rid of this error, create new file inside of services and call this one tsconfig.json. Now inside of this file, we're going to put curly braces, compiler options, like that. And we're going to specify a few options for the compiler. First one is allow.js is going to be true, which allows us to work with JavaScript files. The base URL is going to be dot. emit decorator metadata is going to be true, and experimental decorators is going to be true. You need to have these two for Sequelize TypeScript to work properly. So that's what we're including here. And then module is going to be common.js, which I think we have to write in lowercase. I don't know why it did that. This one's going to be module resolution is going to be Node. So we're going to use Node. And then for paths, in order to include hash root and prevent it from erroring, we need to do this. So this also matches the one we have inside package.json down here. So we write the same thing here. And then we go here. We do strict is true. Target is ES6. And then types is going to be Node. So we do that. And now let's save this file and let's go into access m here, and you'll notice that our error is gone. So this one's working just fine. And now inside of our connection, we have access to access m. And what we're going to do is const db_url is equal to access m db_url like that. And then we're going to do const Sequelize is equal to new Sequelize db_url. Oh, sorry, actually db_url like that. And then curly braces, dialect options. Well, actually, this should probably be named db_url like that because it matches this. So we can keep that. Dialect options is going to be char set UTF-8, and then multiple statements is going to be true. So we need to keep these two settings. Logging, we're going to set to false, so it doesn't log in our console log all over the place. And we're also going to have models, which we're going to add in just a second. So now let's do this first, and let's do export default Sequelize like that. Let's save and let's check index.ts. So we're including the connection. So now if we go here and we write yarn watch, we should be able to get this working without any errors. But you see we're getting an error here for reflect metadata. So what we have to do is simply install it inside of our dependencies. So yarn add reflect metadata like that. So now that that is installed, let's try yarn watch again. And you'll notice that we're not getting any errors, which means that it's working just fine. So now that we have this inside of our connection, we've got our connection to the database, but we also need to set up the models for our Sequelize. So I'm going to show you how to set that up now. Specifically inside of DB here, let's create a new file and call this one models.ts. Now inside of this file is we're going to specify our chef model and also our restaurant model. So firstly, let's go up here at the top and let's do import table from Sequelize TypeScript like that. And then let's go here and let's use decorator syntax, which if you remember, we enabled here. So now let's go here and do at table with a capital T. And then we write default scope, and then we're going to write attributes exclude deleted at. So essentially what this means is that the default scope that we return does not include deleted at, because deleted at is specifically just for checking if a row has been deleted. So we generally don't want to include it in the default scope because we don't need it. So now that we write this, what we do is export class chef extends model. Chef like that. Model comes from Sequelize TypeScript as well. And then chef is just self-reference to this one here. So now let's do curly braces here. And then let's add in our columns. So specifically for the columns, let's do at column here, and then we add that into the top. Let's reorder this real quick. So column goes here, and then at column, we're going to specify allow null is false, auto increment is true, primary key is true, and the type is going to be data type.integer.unsigned, and data type comes from here as well. So this one here, our allow null, auto increment, primary key, all of this matches what we have inside of Sequelize. So you'll notice inside of the migration is we have allow null false, auto increment true, primary key true, and type data types integer unsigned. So it's the same thing over here. So we do the exact same thing here for the column, and then we do ID, and then like this, and then string like that. So this exclamation mark means we don't need to specifically define the value before we actually construct it. So I'll show you what I mean by this is let's have this now. Let's go into tsconfig.json. You notice strict here is true. So with strict type checking being true here, if we get rid of this here, you'll notice what happens is we get an error, and the error says it has no initializer and is not definitely assigned in the constructor. So adding the exclamation mark just helps mask that issue here. It really isn't a solution to assign a default value to this, because every time that we use this inside of our code, it does get a value sent into it, because we might use it in a find one to get a row from the table, or we might create a new row. Either way, this information does get populated, so it's more appropriate to use an exclamation mark here. Also, you might be wondering why we use string here. Now, the reason that we use string is because you can technically use number, but But the idea with an ID is that it isn't necessarily meant to be in a number format or in a specific format. So with the concept of an ID being opaque, it's generally a better idea to keep it as a string and to not depend upon the exact value. Also, when we work with IDs inside of GraphQL, all of the IDs get serialized into a string. So I think it's just more appropriate to use string here. Now let's add in this column, and let's go down here, add a second column, allow null false, and we're going to do data type dot string like that. And this one's going to be the name. So now that we have these two, let's add in one more column down here. But this one's not going to use column, it's going to use has many. And has many is going to refer to restaurant. And what we're going to do here is we're going to add has many is already here. Great. We're going to put it in alphabetical order because I'm pedantic like that. And then here I'm going to do restaurants. And this one is going to be an array of restaurants like that. So now let's define the restaurant class. Perfect time to do that. So essentially this means, okay, we have, there's a relationship between chefs and restaurants, and that is that the restaurants property will contain all the restaurants belonging to the chef. So anyways, we go here, we do at table, and let's actually just copy this because it's pretty much the same, and paste that here. And this part here is going to be restaurants. And then let's do export class restaurant extends model, the models of restaurant as well. And inside of here, we can grab the ID and just paste that in. And then we can go here to at column. And this one's going to be allow null false, and then type data type dot integer dot unsigned. And also we're going to do at foreign key. So let's add in foreign key here before it puts it in non-alphabetical order again. And then for the foreign key, we're going to do at foreign key like that, if I can spell. And then we're going to refer specifically to the chef table. So now that we've done that, we do chef ID, and then it's going to be a string, and then at column, and we do curly brace, allow null is false. And then type is data type dot string. And this one is the name. So name is a string here as well. And then finally we do at belongs to, which I should add in again. So belongs to up here, and we do at belongs to the chef. So this one belongs to the chef, and the chef has many restaurants. Now, in some cases, it might have one restaurant. So for example, if there is a one-to-one relationship, like for example, let's just say that each student has one school bag, then the school bag belongs to the student, and the student has one school bag. But in the case of a restaurant, it's a has many type relationship. So that's what we're using here. So we do belongs to chef, and then chef, chef like that. And let's go down the bottom here and do export default and an array. We do chef and restaurant like that. The reason we do this is because now inside of connection, what we do is we import models. So we do import models from models, and then we import the models in an array format like so. And this hopefully should still work fine. So we can wait on this to show, and I think it is working just fine because we have nothing showing here just yet to see if it's working or not. So if it's not giving us an error, I'm going to assume that it's working correctly. Anyways, let's go back into index.ts here, and let's look at building out the server. So specifically, let's uncomment out this line here, and let's create a new file inside of server /start server.ts. And inside of this file here, we're going to do import Apollo server from Apollo server express. So this is going to be our Apollo server, import or as cause from cause, import or as express from express like that. And then we're going to go here and we're going to write const port is equal to access env, and we need to import this obviously, port, and then the default port is going to be 7000. So like I said, we're sticking with the 7000 range. Our database is on 7999, our server is on 7000, and our app will be on 7001. So anyways, we do this and we do import access env from hash root /helpers /access env like that. So now that we've done this, let's go here and let's do const app is equal to express. And I've got this section of code over here that I'm going to copy in for my cause. Honestly, I'm not too sure at this stage what this means. I have researched it in the past, but this kind of stuff I forget all the time. So this is what I always use, and this essentially allows me to access this server from within a front-end app on any other domain. So generally this is good for development and early production, but in an actual production environment, you do kind of want to constrain it down a little bit. But I think for now, for the case of our project, this should be just fine. So now let's go down here and write app.listen like this. and then let's do the port, and then we're going to make it listen on 0.0.0.0, and then we're going to console log when it's done, or console.info. We're going to call this one GraphQL, let's just say GSD, because GraphQL Sequelize demo, service listening on, and then the port number like that. So now let's save this file, and hopefully it should show something here. It seems that we do not have start server, even though start server is here. Let me try to save this file again and see if we can pick up on that file. And there we go. And the GSD service is listening on 7,000. So now at this stage, we can go to our browser. And if we do localhost 7,000, we should get technically an error, but also a success message saying cannot get /. And this essentially means that we're already at a point where in our application where the Express server is working, but it doesn't have any routes set up at the moment. So now what we're going to do is look at setting up GraphQL inside of our start server. So inside of the server here, you'll notice we have our Apollo server already imported, but what we need to do now is set up the schema for GraphQL. So we're going to go into SRC here, create a new directory called GraphQL, and I'm going to create a file called typedefs.ts. So this is going to be our type definitions, also known as the schema for our project. So inside of this file here, let's write import GQL from Apollo server like that. And then we're going to write const typedefs is equal to GQL, and we're going to write this out. So let me just leave a comment in there like that, and then export default typedefs first. And let me explain what's going to go on here. So we're going to specify the actual structure of our GraphQL API. So this essentially means everything that we can do inside of our application, whether it be which types of queries, which types of data we can fetch, all of that, including the shape of our data, the different types of data we have, all of that is specified inside of here. So let's do, firstly, let's do type chef. So we're going to specify our chef type, which is going to have an ID. The exclamation mark means that the ID is required, and then name here is going to be a required string. And we also have restaurants. So restaurants is going to be an array of restaurants. The restaurants must be required, so they can't be null. And the array itself also cannot be null. So basically, if I explain this real quick, if I had like restaurant like this, then a null would be valid, and this would also be valid. So both of these would be valid values. If I did restaurant like this, then null will be valid, but this would not be valid. So you have to have a restaurant inside of there. And then if I did restaurant like this, with an exclamation mark on the outside, then null would not be valid, but this would be valid. So by putting it in both places, none of these null type values will be valid. So that's how we're going to do this. And then let's do type restaurant here. And restaurant's going to be a bit simpler. It's just going to have an ID and also a name, which is going to be a string. So now we specify this this way because our chef has restaurants belonging to it, and the restaurant, we don't need to kind of tie that back into the chef. So I'll show you what I mean later on in the video. Let's do type query here, and let's do chefs, and this one is going to return an array of chefs like this. So now that we have this and we have our query, the query is quite special because there's something called the query and also something known as the mutation. So a query specifically is for fetching data, whereas the mutation is kind of the idea of whenever you need to change something on the server, then you would use a mutation. So anyways, for our query here, what we're going to do, we're going to create a resolver specifically to resolve the value for this query. So now we're going to go into GraphQL here again, and we're going to create a new file, and we're going to call this one resolvers/query/index.ts. So now inside of this file, we're going to do export default as chefs from /chefs. So obviously we're going to write up this file here now. So inside of here, we do new file chefs.ts. Now inside of this file here, we're just going to write some really simple code, import chef from #root/db/models. So remember, #root refers to SRC, so we don't have to do ../.././db models. This is a lot easier. And then we do const chefs resolver is equal to this, and then return chef.findAll. So this syntax here specifically is from Sequelize, which allows us to fetch all of our chef rows. So we can directly fetch this and it will return an array. Well, it actually returns a promise, but the promise resolves into an array. And the reason we can just do this straight away is because it returns an array of chefs, and our chef's ID, name, and also restaurants, which we'll add later, but ID and name specifically match the names given to those columns inside of the model. So you notice inside of our model, we do have ID and also name and also restaurants here. So by having this, we can directly allow that data to be fetched. So now that we've done this, we do chef.findAll, and then we do export default chefs resolver like that. Let's save this file here. And what we're going to do is back inside of our server, inside of startserver.ts here, we're going to import resolvers from hashroot/GraphQL/resolvers like that. And we're also going to import type defs from the similar location. Now resolvers here is giving me a problem because I haven't included an index file here. So we're going to add resolvers index.ts. And inside of this file here, we're going to do import all as query from /query. And then const resolvers is equal to query like that. And then export default resolvers. So now let's save this file here. Let's save this file here again. And what we're going to do is right here, we're going to do const Apollo server is equal to new Apollo server. And we're going to pass in the resolvers and also the type defs like that. So now that we've done this, underneath our app here, let's do Apollo server.apply middleware. And then we're going to add in the app, which is our Express app, and then the path, which is /GraphQL. So now once you have this, let's just let this rebuild and it hopefully should work fine. But it seems that it's still giving us an error for the resolvers, which is weird because we do have this file. Let me try to Control-C this and start it again. And it seems to be working just fine. So now let's go back into our browser and have a look. This should still give us cannot get /, but if we go to /GraphQL, you notice that we get the GraphQL playground. How cool is that? So now inside of here, what we're going to do is put curly braces, and if we start typing the letter C, you'll notice that we get suggestions for chef. So now if I do ID and name for the chef, and I click play, you'll notice that we get back an empty array of no chefs. So in order to see some data here, we can actually go into SQL Pro, into chefs, and let's add in a chef. So for the ID, let's just put 1, and the name is going to be Gordon Ramsay. Created at is now, updated at is now as well. So if that's a little bit hard to see, it's a now with round brackets, so NOW all caps, and then starting parentheses, close parentheses, and the same thing for updated at. So you need to have that, which basically is a SQL function to give you the current time. So we have that in here for our row, and now if I press play again, you'll notice that we have one chef named Gordon Ramsay. But if I do restaurants here, and then let's just say do ID name inside of here to fetch the restaurants, you notice we get cannot return null for non-nullable field chef.restaurants. So it doesn't give us the data by default, but we can get it to return this, and I'm going to show you how to do that in just a second. But firstly, let's go into restaurants here, and for Gordon Ramsay, let's add in a single restaurant. So the ID is 1, chef ID has to be 1 here because to match Gordon Ramsay, and then the restaurant name we're going to do restaurant Gordon Ramsay, and then we're going to do now and now again. So now that we have this, we'd expect it to show, but it still won't show. This error isn't because we have no data in our database. This error is because we haven't specifically set up a way to resolve restaurants. So in order to fix this problem, what we're going to do is inside of our resolvers here, where we have query, we're also going to add in a new file here and call this one chef.ts. So this one's specifically going to be a set of custom resolvers for our chef. Now, before I write out this file, let me explain how it works. For certain properties like ID and name, you can find them on each chef object. So on the chef object, you already have an ID, you already have a name. But there are also ones which I like to call dynamic properties, like for example, restaurants here, which aren't present on the object. And if you try to fetch them, then obviously they are null, so then it will give you an error. But then what you're meant to do for these kinds of properties is you're meant to create a custom resolver to resolve them within the context of the chef type. So this one here is the chef's resolver on the query type, which returns all the chefs, but we can also do that for restaurants here. Now, it doesn't have to return an array, and if it returns an array, it doesn't necessarily have to be a dynamic resolver. You might have something else here, like for example, chef score. This might be an int, for example, and this one you might also compute dynamically on the spot. Either way, it just really depends upon whether the data is already in your chef object. In the case of restaurants, it is not. This bit of code we have here for this is essentially just a formality of sorts. It's really not doing anything for us here, but we nonetheless include this and also include that to specify that there is a relationship between these two, but we're not using that at the moment. So anyways, we've got restaurants over here, and inside of chef.ts, we're just going to write inside of here, import chef restaurant from hashroot db models like that. So we're going to include both, and we're going to create an object for the resolvers and export this object like that. And then for restaurants here, we're going to take in a chef, which is going to be the chef. And the reason that we take in a chef is because the first parameter here is the context. So in the case of restaurants, the surrounding context is the chef. So the chef object is basically what we get here. So for each of the chef objects, that gets passed into as the context. So that's the chef here. And then for that particular chef, we do return restaurant.findAll. And then we include, and this is Sequelize syntax again. So we include the chef where ID is chef.id. Basically what this means is we fetch all the restaurants for a particular chef, and then we do order and then name ascending. So we're going to fetch all the restaurants in order of ascending by name. So now that we have this file here inside of index.ts, we're going to import chef. We're not going to import all as because we only export default. So we do that and we're going to add it into our resolvers like that. So now that we've done this, let's just wait for the service to come back online. And let's go back into Google Chrome, refresh the page and click play. So now you notice we get our chefs, ID1 name Gordon Ramsay, and we have one restaurant, which is restaurant Gordon Ramsay. Now, if we were to go here to delete it at, and let's set this one to now, so we can soft delete the restaurant, you'll notice that it disappears from the list here and we get an empty array. So now let's get rid of that. Let's go back here and press play again, and you notice that it comes straight back. So now that we've done this, let's go back into our code over here. We have the ability to fetch the chefs and also the ability to fetch the restaurants. So we're going to leave the services as is like this for now, and we're going to go back into our app. So specifically our app over here, we're going to first get parcel set up. So first we do yarn add -d parcel bundler, and let's go into package.json over here and let's add in a script. So script here, and we're going to add in the watch script, and this one's going to take parcel, and we're going to specify the port of 7001 src/index.html. So if you remember what I said about ports before, we're trying to keep it all under 7000. So then we do app src/index.html. Let's set up a basic HTML page just like this, get rid of all this chaff over here that we don't need for the time being, and we're going to call this one GraphQL Sequelize demo like that. So now inside of the body here, we're going to do div id equals app like that, and then script src equals /index.tsx, and we're going to create this file right now. So anyways, let's save that real quick. Go here, new file, index.tsx, not tsc. And inside of this file here, we're going to write import all as React from React, import render from React DOM, and let's just do a simple render. H1 is going to be working, and we're going to do document.getElementById and app like that. So now if I save this and I do yarn watch, it should automatically install React and React DOM. But what I'm going to do is add them in myself so I have better control over the version numbers. So yarn add React DOM like that. We're going to just wait for that to install, and now we're going to do yarn watch like that. So now you'll notice that it has added in TypeScript because it needs that in order to do the building. So now that we've done that, let's go to localhost 7001. So 7001 over here, and it shows GraphQL Sequelize demo is working. So that's perfect for now. Let's look at setting this up a little bit further so that we can show the chefs and restaurants and essentially integrate with the little bit of the backend API that we have so far. So what I'm going to do is just first set up a few basic styles. And to do this, we're going to do import create global style from styled components. And then I'm going to do const global style here, and let's just write create global style like that. So this essentially sets up some global styles for our application, and I'm going to import the Roboto font. So to do that, let's go to google.com/fonts, and obviously you don't have to do this. This is just to get the font working for the page. So I'm going to use Roboto, and then for the font family here, I'm going to customize, and I'm going to specifically select 300 and 500 without 400. So now after I do that, go back to the embed, and I'm going to copy the import rule here. So just grab that line right there, and then I'm going to paste that right here, and then do body, font family, Roboto, and then sans serif like that. So now that I've done that, inside of here, instead of rendering working, what we're going to do is render a fragment and then put global style here, and then I'm going to render root. So root is going to be our component, which we get from /components/root like that. So now let's save this file first. Obviously we get an error here, but we're going to go src, new file, and then we're going to do components/root/root.tsx. And this is going to be our component file, which looks like this. And then new file here, index.ts, and then boiler index root like that. Now, the reason we use tsx is because this file contains JSX code, whereas this one does not, so it just uses .ts. So now we have these two files here. Let's do a quick save over here, and it should work just fine. So if I go into Google Chrome, you'll notice that we have root in very nice Roboto over here. So now that we have this inside of our root component here, let's start building out this component. So import styled from styled components, const heading is equal to style.strong. Display is going to be block, font size 2 rem, and margin 0.75 em, 0.1 em. So why do we use rem and em instead of pixels? Now, the reason we use rem is because the rem is actually based upon the font size that the user selects for the browser. So they can choose to increase or decrease this font size based upon their level of vision or whatever it might be. So by using rem, we actually really accommodate for that, whereas using pixels means it's a fixed size. So that's why we use rem here. And the em here is because this basically means that this value of the margin is based upon the font size. So it just makes it really easy to scale up and down if we were to change the font size here. Now, you might also wonder why we're using a strong tag and not, like, for example, an H1. The reason for that is because technically you're not meant to have more than one H1 on a page. And if you have an H2, for example, it needs to be nested after an H1 or something like that. There are a lot of semantic rules surrounding H1 tags and H2, whatever. So I don't like to use those. I prefer to just use strong. So anyways, I'm going to do something like this and then do const wrapper is equal to style.div. And this is going to be essentially the wrapper for our app. You can think of it that way. So margin is going to be 0 auto, and the width is going to be 60 rem like that. So we do a wrapper like this, if I can spell it correctly. And then inside of here, we're going to do heading, and I'm going to write chefs and their restaurants. So that's going to be essentially our app. We save this and we have a look, and you'll notice that our page says chefs and their restaurants. So now we're going to put a chefs component inside of here. So firstly, let's import this and let it break, and let's do chefs down here. And inside of root, we're going to create a new file, chefs/tsx like that. And it's just going to be a simple file like this, and then new file, index.ts, create a file, chefs like that, and then save in root again. And then we should be able to see chefs here. So now that we have that inside of chefs.tsx, we're going to look at fetching the list of chefs onto this page here. So the way we do that is we use the Apollo React library. So in order to do that, let's first install that. So Control C over here. And I know that Parcel installs it by default, but I do like to do this myself, just so I'm showing you what I'm doing here. So firstly, let's do yarn add Apollo /React hooks. So this is going to be 4 React hooks here. And then yarn add Apollo cache in memory, Apollo client, and also Apollo link HTTP. And then also yarn add GraphQL and GraphQL tag. We need to have these two as well. So now that we have all of these installed and we look at the package JSON, you notice that we have all of those here, and the React got overwritten again for some reason. But anyways, so now let's go into index.tsx here. And what we have to do is we have to set up GraphQL at a global level before we can use it inside of a component. So firstly, let's go into src and then create a file called api/graphql.ts. So now inside of this file here, we're going to do import Apollo client from Apollo client like that. Import HTTP link from Apollo link HTTP, and then import in-memory cache from Apollo cache in memory like that. So now that we have these ones done, let's do export const cache is equal to new in-memory cache. I like to export it because sometimes I use it to fetch certain values or to empty the cache and whatnot. So I like to export it, but I don't think you need to for the sake of this project. Anyways, we do const client is equal to new Apollo client, and it's going to take in the cache. And then the link is going to be new HTTP link. And we're going to do URI process.env.services URI plus /GraphQL like that. So obviously we haven't set up this yet, but we're going to set this up right now. So we do that, and then we do export default client like so. Let's save this file and let's Control C this. Wait, it's already done. So now let's go into app over here, create a new file, call this one .env.example. And we're going to create one called services URI is equal to HTTP localhost 7000, and then no / at the end because it adds in the / here. So now we have this file here. Let's copy that, create a new file again. We're going to call this one .env, and we're going to paste essentially the same thing inside of here. So now we're going to watch and run this again after we include it here. So we're going to go here and just write import GraphQL client from ./API/GraphQL. And then instead of rendering an empty fragment, firstly, let's add in the Apollo provider. So import Apollo provider from React Apollo like that. And then instead of writing this here, we're going to write Apollo provider client is equal to GraphQL client like that. And then Apollo provider here as well. So Apollo provider on the top and the bottom, and we have our client from API GraphQL. So it seems that we forgot to install React Apollo, so let's add in that as well. So yarn add React Apollo, and now let's do yarn watch. Now let's go into chefs over here, and let's start building out our query. So what we're going to do is we're going to import use query from Apollo or at Apollo /React hooks. And we're also going to import GQL from GraphQL tag like that. So what we're going to do is right here, const query is equal to GQL. And inside of here, we're going to put curly braces, chefs, ID, name, restaurants, and then ID name. Now this might look familiar, and that's because we use the exact same thing right here. So we're going to fetch all of that data, and in order to fetch it inside of our component here, we're going to do const, and then data and loading is equal to use query, and then we're going to put the query here. And inside of here, instead of returning the h1, we're going to do pre, and then json.stringify data null2. So this will show the output of the data on our page here. And now we have our query here. Now, before we continue, let's add in the tsconfig into the app. So app over here, let's do tsconfig.json. And the options here for this one are quite similar to the services, but also slightly different. So this is the one we have for our services, but we're going to get rid of this one here, and we're also going to add in JSX, which is going to be React. And then common.js is fine. Module resolution is not Node. We're going to get rid of that. Keep strict as true is fine. Target ES6 is fine. And get rid of the Node one there. So now we're going to save this, close that. And now you'll notice that we have an error for React. So the error is that we don't have the React type. So we're going to add that in. So Control C this, yarn add -d at types /React. So now that we've done that, for the query here, what we're actually going to do is specify exactly what data we're going to be getting from the query. So Apollo has built-in TypeScript support, which is why we don't need to specify the types for that. What we're going to do is write query data here. And then on top of this here, we're going to do interface query data. And specifically, this is going to be return chefs. So chefs is going to be an array of chefs like that. And then we're going to add in a chef interface, and then chef is going to take ID string, name is a string, and then restaurants is going to be an array of restaurants like that. And then for the restaurants, we're going to go here, interface restaurant, and then ID string, name string like so. So now that we've specified that we have the data and we're showing it on our page, we should be able to do yarn watch here, if I can spell that correctly, and then it should be able to show correctly onto the page. And now let's go over here, and you'll notice we have chefs, ID1 name Gordon Ramsay, restaurants, and then ID name, and we have the type name here, which essentially represents the type of this object, and also the type of this object here, of this one here. So basically, it's some hints that Apollo needs to use, which is why it's included here. But anyways, so now that we have this, you'll notice that we can show our data on the page, but instead of showing it like this, we're going to show it in a slightly more fancy way. So to do that, let's import styled components like that. And then on top of our query here, just write const chef is equal to style.div. And we're just going to add in here, margin bottom is going to be 1 rem. Remember, once again, we're trying to stay away from pixels here. So const chef name is equal to style.strong, and then font size is 1.5 rem. And instead of showing the pre-tag here, we're going to put round brackets there like that. And actually one more thing here. So const wrapper is going to be style.div, and we're actually going to leave the styles empty for this for now. I think it's a good idea to kind of leave it empty and know that you have an intention of styling it. So this is usually what I tend to do during the development process. Now you may feel free to use a div here, that's totally fine, but I like to do this because I like to add styles into it as I go along. Anyways, so now let's go into here and let's put in our wrapper, and then instead of just dumping it out as JSON, we're going to do data.chefs.map, and we're going to take in a chef, and we're going to do chef key is equal to chef.id. So we need to specify a key, and then chef name is going to be chef.name like that. So we're going to show the name of the chef here. And then one more thing we need to do is that if it is in fact loading, we need to do return loading like that. We are getting an error here, and the error is that it is possibly undefined. So all we have to do for that is that data and to negate that possibility So now that we've done this, let's just save this here, go into Chrome, refresh, and you'll notice that we have Gordon Ramsay on the page. I didn't actually need to refresh, but I did so anyways. So now that we have that there, what we're going to do is also add in the list of restaurants. So let's go back here into the styles, and let's do const restaurants is equal to style.div. Display is going to be flex flow row wrap. So we're actually going to let it wrap, and you'll see why soon enough. And then margin top is going to be 0.5 rem. And on top of this here, we're going to do const restaurant is equal to style.span. Background color is going to be a very light shade of gray, 6Es like that. Font size 1 rem. Font weight is going to be 300. Padding is 0.25 em. And then margin is 0.25 rem, 0.5 rem, 0.25 rem, and 0 like so. So now let's save this. Well, technically you might actually be better off representing these as EM. It really just depends on your needs. I don't think there's too big of an issue here, but if I were to actually change this, I might consider using EM, but let's leave it for now. And let's go down here in the code, and underneath chef name here, we're going to add restaurants. So we're going to put the restaurants here, and we're going to do chef.restaurants.map, and then this is going to take in the restaurant like that, and then restaurant key is equal to restaurant.id like that. And then we're going to do restaurant.name, and I'm going to make sure this is spelled correctly. Now you'll notice something is that it actually understands it based upon the query data, the interface that we pass in here. So if I try to access something like restaurant.age or something, you notice that we do get the squiggly line because it doesn't exist on type restaurant. So this is very well typed thanks to TypeScript and thanks to Apollo. So now that we have this here, let's save this, refresh, and you'll notice that we get restaurant Gordon Ramsay showing on the page, which is really cool. So now if I go here and I actually add in a second restaurant, for example, I go here and I do 2, 1, and then the name of this restaurant is a Petrus, which is another one of his Michelin starred restaurants, and then now like that. And if we go back here and refresh, you notice that we get both of those restaurants on the page. Firstly P, then R, because we're doing it in alphabetical order. So now we essentially already have the ability to show everything we want onto the page. However, we don't have the ability to add chefs, and we don't have the ability to add restaurants. So we're going to add in that functionality now, firstly via the services. So now let's go back into the code over here, and let's go back into the services. So we can forget about the app for just a second over here. And inside of our services here, let's go into type defs and let's define a mutation. So type mutation over here, and we're going to define create chef. And this one is going to take in a name, which is going to be a required string. And this one's going to return a chef like so. So now that we've got this, we obviously need to define our mutation. So the way we're going to do this is create another directory like this. So new file, mutation / create chef.ts like that. New file, index.ts, and we're going to export create chef like so. And then inside of index.ts, we're going to import all as mutation from mutation, and we're going to add it to our resolvers like that. So now that we've done this, inside of create chef over here, let's write in import chef from hash root /db /models like that, and then const create chef resolver is equal to context, which will be anything, because we're on the mutation object, we don't actually get anything important here, so you can just write any, and then we're going to take in the name, and we're going to type this, so the name is going to be string, and then inside of here we're going to do return chef.create name. So if you remember what I said before about an ORM making your life a lot easier, this is exactly what I mean here. Now this, if it were an actual SQL query, would be something like insert into chefs, and then you'd have to specify the column names, and then you'd have to also do a SQL injection prevention. So we're cleaning the data for the name. You also have to worry about paranoid fields. And then when you have a lot of these over your whole application, you also have to update them if you were to change your table. So the whole thing just becomes really messy, and ORMs just really help to simplify that process. So now anyways, let's do export default create chef resolver. So the reason we call it create chef resolver is because to have consistency with our query, which is chef's resolver, and this one's called create chef. So we're going to do create chef resolver like that. So anyways, let's go back into our playground over here, and then let's get rid of this part here, and let's add the word mutation at the front. So this is how you define a mutation, is instead of writing nothing or writing query, which is a query, you can write mutation here. So now that we do that, you'll notice that our autocomplete changes, and up here, instead of a Q, we get M, which means it's a mutation. And then for the chef, we need to provide a name. So let's add in Jamie Oliver. So then let's go to the end, and then we're also going to do ID name. So these two are essentially getting the ID and the name of the chef. Now you'll remember that over here we specified that this one should return a chef object. And that's exactly what we did here, is we actually returned the chef object here. So what we're doing is we're actually kind of artificially creating a one-to-one mapping between the Sequelize models and the GraphQL types we have over here. So it makes life really easy, because then we can just return chef.create instead of having to do some fancy transformation magic. We can just keep it one and the same. So anyways, we do something like this, and then over here we do something like that. And then if we press play, you'll notice that we get chef ID is 2, name is Jamie Oliver. Now you do not want to press this again unless you want 2 Jamie Olivers in your table, because you'll notice that in Sequelize over here now, we have Jamie Oliver as our second chef. So now if I refresh over here, we have Jamie Oliver appear on the page as well. So what we're going to do is, now that we have create chef, let's also add in create restaurant in one go, and then let's add in the code to handle both of these inside of our app. So inside of mutation, let's just copy create chef and just paste it again. So this one's going to be create restaurant like that. And this one we're going to call create restaurant resolver, and we're going to export it here. So create restaurant like that. Let's go into type defs over here and let's add that in. So create restaurant takes in a name, but it also takes in a chef ID as well, because we add in the restaurant for a particular chef and it returns a particular restaurant. So we do something like this, and then inside of a create restaurant resolver, we take in a name, but we also take in a chef ID. So chef ID name, and chef ID is a string and so is the name. So chef ID name, chef ID string, name string in create restaurant resolver, and we do return restaurant.create, and we pass in the name, but we also pass in the chef ID like that, and we change this one to say restaurant. So now that we've done this, let's go back into our playground over here. Let's just refresh real quick, and let's do create restaurant like that. And for chef ID, let's do chef ID 2 for Jamie Oliver, and the restaurant's name I think was Jamie's Italian or something like that. It doesn't really matter here. So we're going to do ID and name like that, and then press play. And now you see we have a new restaurant, Jamie's Italian, and that appears right here. So this basically means that all of our mutations are working correctly. So let's hook it up now with the front end. So let's go over here, close the services, open up app over here, and inside of here where we have chefs, what we're going to do is we're going to add in something to add a restaurant to a chef. So let's go up here and let's first add in the add restaurant component. And I'm going to write add restaurant, and I'm going to paste add restaurant here, and it's going to be after our list of restaurants. So now that we've done this, let's create this obviously. So new file, add restaurant.tsx, and do that. And then new file, index.ts, add in this file here as well. So we have our index.ts, which imports this, which is our component. So now inside of this component, we use React here like this, but let's also add in import use state from React. One of my kind of gripes with TypeScript is that there really is no way to combine these two into one line. But anyways, let's continue. So then import use form from React hook form, and then also import styled from styled components. So inside of add restaurant here, what we're going to do is we're going to add in const is adding, and then also set is adding is equal to use state false. And I'm going to show you what I'm trying to do here. So if not is adding, so if is adding is false, then we return a wrapper, which we're going to define soon, and then add restaurant button on click is equal to set is adding to be true. So basically we have a button which allows us to add a restaurant instead of just providing a text field right there. So add restaurant like that, and now let's define our wrapper. So const wrapper is equal to style.div, and relatively simple, just 0.25 rem on the top and bottom, and then 0 on the left and right. And for our button, we do const add restaurant button is equal to style.button like this. And we're going to style it so that it looks quite similar to the other ones there. So we're going to do border 1 pixel dashed hash AAA like that. Now I did say that I don't like to use pixels that often, but generally for borders, I don't really mind. I mean, you can still use rem for this one and just figure out the exact number, but this works fine for me. And then we do color, a lot of 5s there like that. Font family inherit, font size 1 rem, font weight 400. Now font family inherit, the reason we do this is because buttons by default have their own kind of font. So if you want it to take the font of the parent and like have the font of Roboto Cascade down, you have to write font family inherit. So that's what we do here, and then padding 0.25 em, and then when we hover over it, we have a cursor of pointer. So now let's save this, and it should do some installation inside of here, but we are getting an error. So all I need to do is save this, I think, and also save that. And it is building. So now that we've done this, let's refresh on the page, and you notice we have add a restaurant over here. every time in this video I've said refresh on the page, it's already refreshed, but you know, I'm just gonna keep saying it so I don't get embarrassed by myself. Anyways, so let's go back here, and if I click on it, you'll notice that it shows add restaurant, because then is adding becomes true. So anyways, we're going to go here and we're going to return our wrapper, and we're going to put in a little form. So it's going to be form on submit is equal to on submit, and let's just leave that like that, and let's add in our form handler. So specifically we are using React Hook Form. I have made a video on React Hook Form in the past, so you can go watch that. Let's go here and do const and then do form state, and we're going to add in is valid here, and then handle submit, register, and then we're going to do this on use form, and then the mode is going to be on change. So let me explain this really quickly whilst I add in the rest of this code here. So our on submit, we're going to define right here. Const on submit is equal to handle submit like this, and we're going to leave this one empty for now like that. And inside of our form over here, we're going to add in text field, which we're going to define in a second. Autofocus, name is equal to name, type is equal to text, and then the ref is going to be register, and required is going to be true. So basically this field needs to be filled in and needs to be non-empty in order for the form to actually submit. So that's what this part of the code here does. I'm going to add in a button, just a regular old button, going to be disabled if the form is not valid, and it's going to be type equals submit, and it's going to say add. So we're going to do that and then add in a text field up here. So we're going to write const text field is equal to style.input, and then border is going to be 0, but the border bottom 0.125 rem, solid hash 6 Cs like that. So like I said, I'm not really consistent with this. This by default is like 2 pixels or something. So you probably should change this, I guess, like 0.0625 rem. So for consistency, font family inherit, font size 1 rem, font weight 300, padding 0.25 em. And then when you focus, the border bottom color becomes A, like that, and then outline is going to be none. So now let's save this and let's see if it works just fine. So if I refresh and I click add restaurant, you notice that we have this nice little input over here. And we also go here, we have the same input over there. Now we're going to add in our code for the on submit here. What we're actually going to do is we're going to pass the actual submit handler out into chefs. So I'm going to show you how I'm going to do that. Inside of here, let's do on add restaurant, which is going to be our prop, which we then map into push add restaurant. And then we're going to define this inside of add restaurant props like that. So we're going to take add restaurant props, do an interface here real quick. And it seems that we do not have the types for styled components. So let's add that in whilst we're at it. So add types styled components like so. And then for add restaurant props here, let's do on add restaurant. It's going to take in a name, which is going to be a string, and it's going to return a promise, which resolves to nothing. So now let's do that. Go down here, we have our push add restaurant, and inside of our handle submit, let's make this one async, and it's going to take a name here, and then we're going to do await push add restaurant, and then the name is going to go here. So now let's do that, and then we do reset, and then we do set is adding to be false. So our reset goes in here, and it just essentially resets the form. So now let's get rid of push add restaurant here real quick, and just do reset and set is adding. So now for yarn watch here, we should just be able to, when we press add or press enter, go back to the original state of the component. So let's click add restaurant, and let's go here and let's just write in something here, and notice how the button undisables. So now it's disabled, and if I type it's not disabled anymore, I press it, and then it should just take me away from here, but it doesn't seem to be doing that. So let's figure out why. We're getting regenerator runtime is not defined. So if you get this error, what you're meant to do is simply go here, and let's just add in the Babel polyfill. So yarn add at Babel /polyfill, and we're going to include this in the root of our app. So at the very top here, just do import at Babel /polyfill like that. And then we go back here and we do a yarn wash again, and this should work just fine. So now that we've done that, let's go back here, refresh and add restaurant, type something, press add, and it just takes us back to the original screen. But what we're going to do now is we're going to implement this push add restaurant. So in order to do that, let's go into chefs over here and make sure that this file saves for some reason. And then inside of here, we've got add restaurant, which comes from there. And this one's going to take in a prop called on add restaurant. And this one's going to take in a function with a name like that. So this one's going to be async as well. And inside of here, we're going to essentially create the restaurant. And to do that, we have to use the use mutation hook. So up here, when we have use query, before that, we're going to add in use mutation, and we're going to add a mutation here. So let's do const create restaurant mutation is equal to GQL like that. And inside of here, we're going to write mutation, and then chef ID is going to be the ID, and name is going to be the string. So these two are the variables that we're passing into our mutation. And we do create restaurant like that. Chef ID is going to be chef ID, and the name is going to be the name. And we write ID and name like so. And we have our create restaurant mutation. We're going to go up here, and we're going to write const create restaurant in square brackets, because that's the syntax for some reason. Use mutation here, and we're going to specify the actual nature of the data we return. So curly braces here, create restaurant is going to be restaurant. So I'm using an inline interface here. You don't have to do this. You can kind of write what I did with query data, but I'm going to show you how to do it inline. So the first one's going to be the data we return, and the second one is going to be essentially the variables that we pass in. So chef ID here, name like that. One more like that at the end, and then create restaurant mutation like so. So we have create restaurant here, and we're going to go inside of here, and we're going to write await create restaurant, and we're going to pass in variables. And the two variables we're going to have to provide are chef ID, which we can get from chef.id here, and also the name of the restaurant, which we can just get like that. So now once we do this, what we're actually going to do is we're going to refetch. So refetch here is we're going to refetch the actual list of restaurants that we have here. So in order to do that, we're basically just going to rerun this query so that we get the extra data. And to do that, after loading here, let's just add in refetch, which is built in inside of use query. So now that we've done that, let's go into Google Chrome and let's add in another restaurant. So let's go up to add restaurant here, and let's add in Savoy Grill, for example, and press add here, and you'll notice that Savoy Grill appears at the end. So now that we've done that, let's add in one more restaurant, but let's go here, go to network, and let's set it to slow 3G. Add restaurant here, and let's add in, let's just say Hedden Street Kitchen. And now you'll notice that if I press add, this is not disabled, and neither is this. And if I do press it again, it will actually add it twice. So that's something that we want to fix here, and it's disappeared because it's adding it in. But in order to fix this problem, all we have to do is simply disable our form whilst it's submitting. And to do that, all we have to do is inside of add restaurant here, before is valid, let's just add in is submitting like that. And then let's do button disabled if is submitting or is valid like that, and then disabled equals is submitting on our text field. So now that we've done that, let's go back here, open this up again, network, and let's do slow 3G, add a restaurant, and let's just say we do the narrow, and then click add, and you'll notice this is disabled, and so is the button. So now it's disabled, we can set that back to online, so it speeds up again. So now we have the ability to add a restaurant. We're going to do a very similar thing for adding a chef. So inside of chefs.tsx over here, underneath our list of chefs and restaurants here, inside of the wrapper, we're going to do add chef like this, grab add chef, and we're going to import add chef from add chef like this, new file, add chef.tsx, and we're going to add it in like that, and then new file, index.ts, and we're going to add in add chef like so. So now for add chef, we're going to go up to the top and do import use form from React hook form again, and then import styled from styled components. So now that we have these two, what we're going to do is do a similar thing for the form. So form state, let's just do is submitting as well and is valid, and then handle submit, register, and also reset is equal to use form, and we're going to specify this one as inline. So use form name is going to be a string, and then we're going to write mode is on change. Now that is pretty difficult to read, so now you can probably read that a bit more easily. And we're going to do const on submit is equal to handle submit. And let's do an async function inside of here and just currently do nothing. So now inside of our return statement, what we're going to do is our wrapper, which we're going to add now. And our wrapper is actually going to be our form. So we're going to add on submit to that. And now let's define our wrapper. So const wrapper is equal to style.form, and then margin top 1 rem like so. And inside of our wrapper here, we're going to add in a text field. And this one's going to be disabled if it's submitting. Name is equal to name. Placeholder is equal to chef name. Ref is equal to register. And this one's also required as well. And then type is equal to text like that. So this is essentially what we've got. Now let's define our text field here. So we're going to do const text field is equal to style.input, and then font family inherit, font size 1.2 rem, and then font weight 300. So now that we've done that, let's go back down here, add in our button disabled if it's submitting or if it's not valid. Type is equal to submit, and we're going to add in add chef as the text inside of there. And let's go up here, const button is equal to style.button like that. Display inline block, font family is going to be inherit, font size 1.2 rem, font weight 300, and margin left is going to be 0.5 rem like that. So now that we've done this, let's save real quick and see if this renders properly onto our page. So we just need to save that, get that building, and then refresh over here. You'll notice that we have chef name down the bottom. So now currently this, once again, doesn't do anything because it's not hooked up. So let's hook it up right now. So we have on add chef, which becomes push add chef because that's a naming convention I like to use. And this is our add chef props. So let's define that up here. Interface add chef props. And we're going to do on add chef, and it's going to be name, which is going to be a name string like that, and then promise void like so. So very, very similar to the other component we had over there. And our push add chef goes inside of here. So we do await push add chef, our name goes in there. So our name gets passed in here. And then once this is done, we reset the form. So now we've done this, let's go back into chefs over here and let's add in a second mutation. So we have create restaurant mutation, but let's also add in create chef mutation. So for restaurant here, rename this one to chef. Let's get rid of the chef ID and get rid of this part here, and it takes in our ID name like that, create chef mutation. And then we're going to basically take this and duplicate it and rename the top one here to chef. So create chef equals use mutation, create chef, get rid of chef ID. So we only have name, and then create chef mutation like that. So we take create chef here, and then for add chef, what we do is on add chef is equal to async, and we take in the name again. And then we do await create chef, and we take in variables, and we only pass in the name because remember this time we only have the name of the chef. We don't have a chef ID. And then once we finish this, we refetch again so that we can add in the name of the chef. So now that we have this, let's save, and hopefully it should work just fine. So if I go here and let me just enable slow as well, so we can see it if it is slow. And let's add in, say, Mario Batali. Press add chef. Now this is disabled, that's disabled, and it's doing its thing. And then now that's done, and now it's doing a refetch, and we have Mario there. And let's just add in one more chef with a restaurant that I know of. Let's just say Colonel Sanders, one of my personal favorites. Add chef there, and then the restaurant name is KFC. So then we can also press enter to add that into there. So there you go, guys. I hope you guys have enjoyed. Just to recap on what we've done, we've put together an app using React and TypeScript as well, and also style components and React hook form, and also Apollo. So a whole bunch of really employable, nice technologies there. And then for the backend here in the services, we also used a lot of TypeScript. We used Sequelize with MySQL. We set up migrations for Sequelize, and for GraphQL, we also set up 2 mutations and queries as well. And I showed you how to set up the whole process surrounding that. I hope you guys have enjoyed this Code With Me episode. This has been Lucas with Better Coding Academy, and see you guys later.